Hi, I'm Cailey, a librarian here at Mentor Public Library.
And I'm Meg, also a librarian, and welcome to this week's edition of All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg, where each time we give you different book recommendations on a specific theme. Today, it's October, so Cailey and I thought, why not give you some books that creeped us out?
Yes, and I think that we kind of took this in a fun direction because we're not doing your traditional horror so much as books that really got under our skin and sort of unsettled us. So that should be a fun take. And as usual, all of the books we're going to talk about today are available for you on Libby and Hoopla with your library card, as well as the physical copies here at the library. All right, Meg, tell me your first creeped out book.
So my first creeped out book is called The Hike by Drew Magary. And this is technically like a science fiction book. There's kind of some video game elements in it. But what creeped me out about it is it's about this man named Ben, typical suburban family man who takes a business trip to rural Pennsylvania. And when he goes there and stays at the hotel, he's trying to kill some time before his, next business meeting that evening. So he thinks, why not just go on a lovely hike? This area is nice. It's kind of calm and quiet. Well, he goes on this hike, and not soon after he begins, he gets transported into this almost like video game world where he's trapped and he can't get out. So that just creeped me out right from the start because hikes are lovely. I love going on walks. It's such a lovely thing. The thought of being trapped on a hike is just terrifying. So on this journey, he encounters a lot of fantastical elements, including a crustacean that talks profane language and just some really weird creepy stuff. And along this journey, he kind of learns, things that remind him of his past. And eventually he has to search for this mysterious figure called the producer, who is the one who holds the key to him finding, getting out and finding his family again. So just kind of a journey book, but definitely some creepy elements. Also, what's nice about it is it's creepy, but also kind of funny too, which kind of helps make the creepiness, I can take the creepiness if there's some humor to lighten it up a little bit. So I just, it's a fun read, but creepy too.
That is not where I thought that was going to go when you're talking about a guy going off on a hike.
I know.
So I think that is a very unique sounding title. And I can see that being creepy with the whole being trapped element that is unexpected.
Right.
All right. So my first one is definitely not horror and it's not even suspense, but man, did it creep me out. In the not too distant future, an act is passed in the UK, like a legal act that is supposed to help encourage marriage. And their married couples will get tax breaks, they will get health insurance perks, and more. And this started for many different reasons. Married couples are healthier, so less strain on the health system. They live together, so that means less single apartments needed. There's less strain on housing then. And there's, living together means there's dual income usually or oftentimes, which means there's less strain on the welfare system. So the government had their reasons to encourage their citizens to be married. But here we are now, and things have gone into the next level, if you will. And things have started to get a bit out of hand in some areas. Now couples can sign up for something called a smart marriage, which adds some smart tech to their home, kind of like an Alexa, but speakers all over their home. Their smartwatches are enabled with these push notifications to encourage them to support their partner and be a better spouse. But this smart tech is supposed to help monitor their marriage and make sure that their marriage is healthy and strong. And it is run by AI, which kind of gives you that creepy factor right there because it's not that human element. But the AI listens in on the marriage essentially. And if they deem that, your marriage is going poorly or you're arguing a lot or something, then they will send a government issued marriage counselor to your home who can like move in with you and conduct marriage counseling sessions with you and determine the fate of your marriage, whether or not you want them to. So they can say that you should be divorced. And even if you and your spouse don't want to be divorced, the counselor said so. So it makes things very, very tricky. And part of this whole thing that is just ultra creepy to me is like AI listening in does not necessarily understand things like sarcasm.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, jokes that you might make.
Right.
There is one couple featured in this book that has a tendency to like snark at one another in a sort of a jokey way, and they get assigned a marriage counselor. And the marriage counselor like immediately sees that, oh, okay, after listening to the recordings, they were joking. But the dangerous part is that AI is still flagging their marriage and how that can have terrible consequences for them. The other thing that's going on here with the smart marriages and everything is that you find that single people or people not partaking in smart marriages are starting to become less and discriminated against. So a married person would get a job over a single person. The housing for married couples is really improving, but people who are single or even married couples who don't want to upgrade to a smart marriage, their streets are starting to be ignored by the regular city maintenance and things like that. And so you start to see that there's this huge disparity. So I'm not going to tell you specifically any of the perspectives in this book because it is told from a number of perspectives. Okay. So you see one where there is a couple in a smart marriage and how that sort of affects the way they talk to one another. You see a couple who one party wants to be in a smart marriage and one doesn't. And you see people who are completely opposed to the Marriage Act and the riots and stuff that are going on because of that. And you also get perspective from people on the inside who are sort of working on that Marriage Act and trying to influence the people without them knowing they're being influenced. The things that are going on behind the scenes with social media and how they are encouraging people to go along with this plan just really creep me out because it's all this like subliminal messages that you don't really think about. And with the prevalence of social media and smart tech in our lives, this feels like almost like a little too close to home.
Right. Yeah.
But it is a really interesting read, even if it creeped me out a lot. And I've told so many people about it. And so now you internet also get to hear about it.
Yeah, that is super creepy. Great choice. And the funny thing, as you were like talking about like smart marriages, upgrading to a smart marriage, it's like it's like not, it almost sounds not smart, but scary, like scary. Like this is all terrifying, like, and especially terrifying because like you said, it's close to home because it's a current topic. You know, there's a lot of discussion about AI and, you know, the potential things that could be creepy. So yeah, that's a great.
I mean, this title, Marriage Act by John Mars, came out this year. So it is pretty on top of a lot of the current trends and things too. And I think the author even said that he wrote it during the COVID shutdowns. So it's very recent with its references too.
Make me want to turn off my phone for a second. No, I'm just kidding. Right. Well, my next creepy book is called Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix, and horror is in the title. Yes, I know.
Grady Hendrix is awesome.
Yeah. And this one I chose because even though, yes, admittedly, there are horror components in this book, I chose it because the whole presentation of the book is brilliant. So this book is almost like an IKEA catalog. So that's what the cover looks like, you know, like an IKEA the store is called, in the book is called Orsk, and it's kind of a mimic, like a parody of IKEA. And all through the book, you can see very clever illustrations of the store. And what's happening is it looks very well run on the surface. However, one day, one of the workers there, Amy, she is asked by a coworker if she can stay after hours one time. And she's like, why do you want to do this? And he said, well, we've been noticing some weird things lately at our store. we've been finding rats in our kitchen area, even though there's no food, like in the cupboards, almost like there was something there, and there's nothing there. Also, workers are getting lost in the store, kind of mysteriously disappearing, and certain pieces of furniture are kind of getting ruined in random parts, like glass breaking. So just very creepy things are happening in the store. So what happens is Amy and two other coworkers begin an investigation. And what happens next is creepy, a little bit horror, but what's funny is but all the while throughout the whole story, even though these things happen, there's still that very well put together storefront images going through the whole time. So it just is very entertaining and very much I don't know, Stepford Wives, where it's just it's supposed to be super happy on the surface, but no way, this is not happy. This is terrifying. So it's just a great read and very creative. I loved it.
Yes, I will have to check that one out because Grady Hendrix has written some really awesome, humorous horror things like that. That's really cool. Yeah. I will say that I feel like all of their problems could have been solved with security cameras, though.
Yes, please.
Just saying.
I agree.
All right. So my last title that I wanted to mention today is, again, not at all your traditional scary book, but I think it's an important one, and it was a very difficult read, and it definitely did creep me out. Yeah. But not for some of the reasons we've talked about today. So this is Radium Girls by Kate Moore, which came out several years ago. And I know that there was a movie that came out, and I don't think the two were related, but similar topic. And so this tells the story of the largely female workforce who were slowly poisoned by radium in the early 1900s. So poisoning is bad enough in itself, yeah. But they were also just repeatedly lied to and misinformed at their jobs. On their deathbeds, many of these women were being told that the radium certainly wasn't the cause, and they were wasting away from cancers, bone diseases, blood disorders, all of these things from ultimately radium poisoning. These women who started working in the factories, a lot of them as teenagers, were making a lot of money for the time. The radium places paid better than a lot of the other local options for these young women, and it very much helped a lot of families and provided the income for them. But they were painting glow-in-the-dark paint onto watch faces in a lot of these places, and that was a radium-based paint in order for it to glow in the dark. And many of the women were instructed to lick the tips of their paintbrush, so they would have that very fine point, and were ingesting radium on a daily basis in huge amounts. A lot of these women suffered mouth sores that led to further cancers and things from that. Some of them got stomach cancers or ulcers in general from it. And it just continued to spiral. And this went on for so much longer than you would have thought it could have legally gone on. After the first cases of illness were reported, things were covered up by companies. They didn't believe the women. They always tried to attribute things to other cases. There were some women who had their teeth falling out from the radium infecting their mouth. Yeah. And they were told that, well, it must be poor dental hygiene, or they must have some other illness. Meanwhile, documentation shows that so many of these places knew that they were poisoning the women. And these women, what is just horrifying is so many of them were taken down at such young ages. And they were, again, completely lied to over and over again. There's some scenes in here too. The women were fascinated by the radium and the glow-in-the-dark nature of their stuff, but they would go home with this paint sort of flecked on them and didn't even realize it until they'd get home in the dark and see that they were glowing. But that meant they were then exposing their families, their home, their pets, everything to the same toxic substance. So overall, it's a very important read to see what happened historically, and it's really excellently written, but a book that really creeped me out for different reason.
Sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. And the thing about creepiness is it lingers, right? You can't shake off when you're creeped out, you can't shake. So I mean when that kind of stuff is harrowing, real stories like that, it's like it sticks with you. And
Oh yeah.
you
I must
just
have read this book like 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still so fresh in my mind. Some of the scenes that they talk about, some of the women, and it ultimately came to some very high profile court cases before things actually did get shut down.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, it sounds really interesting. And yeah, it's very my heart goes out to them. That sucks. But
Mhm.
all right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this week's edition of All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg. We hope you got some good book recommendations for this time of year that you find interesting.
Yeah, something a little different to creep you out this
Something a little
spooky
different.
season.
Yes.
We will see you next time. Happy reading.
Great.